I get one question repeated often and over and over. What are we going to do to secure our elections? You can pass a lot of laws in Congress, but if we don't secure our elections, we don't have a democracy. You know, for years, our progressive Democrats have falsely claimed that 2016 was stolen because of foreign election interference. Yet today, they are ignoring the real threat of foreign interference, non-citizens registering and voting in U.S. elections. The SAVE Act will address this threat head-on by requiring proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. It's pretty simple. It allows state officials to accept a wide variety of documents that will actually make it easier for citizens to register to vote.
If you want to talk about protecting elections, maybe my Republican friends ought to start telling the truth about the last election. And let me remind them that the leader of their party tried to submit fraudulent slates of electors to steal the last election. That's voter fraud, my friends. That's what voter fraud looks like. And my friends on the other side of the aisle said, not a thing. Not a thing. After court after court after court upheld the fact that we had a free and fair election. But the former president actually submitted fraudulent slates of electors to try to change the result of the last election.
Look, it is difficult for me to sit here and be lectured about the cost of living from the gentleman from Massachusetts. 2 years ago in the Rules Committee, when Republicans were in the minority and Democrats were in the majority, we pleaded with the then majority, do not do the American Rescue Plan. Do not do the Inflation Reduction Act. Do not engage in all of this vast federal spending that they had teed up. See, the problem was, after the coronavirus infection in December of 2020, the economy was basically getting back on its feet. All we had to do was stay out of the way. But instead, $2 trillion the American Rescue Plan, $4 trillion Inflation Reduction Act.
The gentleman from Texas went on about the cost of living and blamed the American Rescue Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. You know what? Those bills were passed in the aftermath of a pandemic to save our economy, to save American families from going bankrupt. And I would remind the gentleman that inflation is coming down faster in the United States than any other country in the world. Unless he's blaming the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Act for increased high inflation in countries like China and other countries around the world. That's absurd. And let me just say one other thing, because this is the rule that we're talking about here today. Republicans, are emboldening our adversaries and abandoning our allies. They defended and held up aid to Ukraine for 9 months, doing irreparable damage to the fight against authoritarianism. And by the way, I should also point out to those who have dragged their feet on Ukraine, Russia bombed a children's hospital in Ukraine. Deal with that. Another war crime. And we had Republicans holding up the Ukraine aid package. The Ukrainians are fighting against authoritarianism. And speaking of authoritarianism, we have here 4 more closed rules, 4 more completely closed rules. Putin would be proud. Some of the most authoritarian rules I have ever seen. They must have learned that from their patron saint, Donald Trump. On the one structured rule here, they made only Republican amendments in order. No bipartisan amendments and Democratic amendments, even though many of them were rule compliant. They would just they just want to shut this place down. They said no to everything. If this is what my Republican friends consider a fair process, wow. I mean, we have a bill that we think will disenfranchise millions of American citizens in terms of voting. And the ranking Democrat, Mr. Morelli, had an amendment that he offered that was totally rule compliant. We ought to at least have that debate. You can vote to suppress the vote all you want, but we ought to have that debate and get people on the record. And the Republicans of the Rules Committee said no. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? a little debate on some of these important issues? You know, we have a different definition of fair, because this process once again makes a mockery of this institution and once again shows the majority's disdain for democracy. The Rules Committee continues to be a place where democracy goes to die. And at this time, Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in opposition not only to this rule, but the bills that it advances. And I have to say that I am amazed daily by the debates that I hear in this chamber and in our committees, and outraged that the GOP is using the floor to advance a hateful agenda, to take away voting rights, and to advance insane legislation. Because 1 week after we celebrated this great nation's independence, we are here today as they're putting forward legislation to protect our kitchen appliances. That's right, folks. Running bills on the floor entitled "The Freedom of Refrigerators" and "Dignity for Dishwashers." I'm not making this up. These are the real names of the bills that they're running this week. Because apparently, they're more concerned about the freedom of our refrigerator than the freedom to make decisions about our own bodies. They're more concerned about our dishwashers than they are about democracy. And they're more concerned about appliances than an autocrat who is seeking re-election, who says he wants to be a dictator on day one. So I ask my colleagues, honestly, how do you do this with a straight face? Because y'all, this ain't normal. This is insane. Is this the freedom and democracy that our country fought for? Arguing for kitchen appliances? Is this what your constituents are telling you? Because mine are telling me that they're terrified about the future of this country and about their families and their rights. They're asking us to fight to protect LGBTQ rights and abortion, to address climate change, to lower costs, to protect voting rights. And you're over here asking us to vote on a bill to protect the rights of dishwashers and refrigerators. It's insane. So I'm just like at a loss. It's time to wake up. It's time to get to work. It's time to serve the American people, because literally our democracy depends on it. And I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The chair would once again like to remind members to refrain from engaging in personalities toward presumptive nominees for the office of president, and also to direct their comments to the chair. The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.